Now I come to the heart and soul of why I wanted to make this video on the terrible Talmud in the first place. The whole reason for that title was I really do think it's terrible, but it's necessary for learning and it's important because the one thing about the Talmud is that it preserves all the warts and it teaches you how to argue in legal terms, and you do need to know that. It develops your skill in thinking, and it especially does so because you're forced to deal with topics that you will definitely find offensive. I do, anyway. What I find offensive about it, you might not find offensive. But that it's really important to argumentation, and that's exactly what you go through in yeshiva. Because you have two students pairing off with each other, and they both take different positions on certain, things that are said in the Mishnah or the Torah or in the Gemara. And you argue either side, whether you believe it or not. The idea is to practice your skill in arguing. Okay, so that's one reason why it's terrible Torah. Okay, but it's terribly important Torah too. The other reason it's terrible Torah title is because this guy is trying to say, terrible Talmud rather, this guy is trying to say that the Talmud is terrible because it's against Christianity. The Torah is not terrible. Talmud is terrible from two perspectives. It really is terrible, but you really need to use it and you really need to learn it. And his terrible Talmud is terribly a lie, as we're going to see. When I saw this side, I almost threw up. But at least, see, even the anti-Semite can be used. See, because this part of it, right in here, is worth reading and worth studying and worth knowing. It's largely accurate. Okay? All the way through here, it's a good summary that you can't even find in Jewish websites. Alright? And then we showed how, it starts going crappy right about here. How it's peppered with lies that get more and greater here. But it's got a lot of truth in there too. Alright, all the way through here, blah, 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 blah. Okay? So, even though this has been written by an anti-Semite who proved on trial not to know what he's talking about, so this must have been ghostwritten, or he plagiarized it from somewhere, it's still a great summary if you want to learn the construction of the Talmud and what it's about. Alright? So now he launches into the real purpose for his sort of semi-scholarly, peppered with key lies introduction. Because now he's going to launch into almost solid lies. I almost threw up when I started investigating this. This is the place where I primarily used to investigate what he said. I also used this place, cominghere.com, which is another anti-Semitic site. So these people, highlighted now, okay, not the Talmud itself, but the site sponsoring them here at cominghere.com. See now, highlighted in blue at the top. Those people have a vested interest in justifying what this guy says here. But they don't. The material that this guy is going to say largely does not exist. Of course, he can say, well, it was expunged. He's dead now. But, somebody supporting him could say it was expunged. Okay, because the firm supporting this guy is in Australia, and they're anti-Semitic. Alright? That's why they're publishing this thing. They're alive, they're anti-Semitic. This guy's been dead for over 100 years, and was proven false on trial. But these guys are still selling what he sold. So the people who are at BibleBelievers.org in Australia, something's wrong with them. They don't get the gospel right either. But these people are anti-Semitic here at cominghere.com also. They spout an anti-Semitic line by Elizabeth Dilling. But they don't have these quotes that he's going to be talking about. Isn't that interesting? Remember what the Lord said when people were against him, that the two witnesses wouldn't agree with each other? All right. So now we're going to go through these arguments one by one. Many passages in the Talmud books treat the birth, life, and death of Jesus Christ. Not so. I found one. Not many. Just one. He says many. Okay? Okay, he's not always referred to by the same name, but is derisively called, and this is actually a Greek phrase, not Hebrew, that man, a certain one. There is no such phrase as the carpenter's son. There is no such phrase as the one who was hanged. He's claiming that these phrases are in there. They're not. Or if they are, they're not part of Talmud. They might be part of other Jewish writings. Namely this one, which I haven't investigated yet. This is the most scurrilous of them. This is not part of Talmud. This is somebody's invention for all you know. It could be a Christian making the Jews look bad. There are many different varieties of this. Just look up that term on the internet. You know, this happens to be at Essene.com. I don't know which version this is. I was just looking up the title, and I came up with 4 or 5 different versions of this story. There's a guy at Cambridge who wrote an article I'd have to pay $30, which probably sorts out which of the articles is the more genuine. But genuine to what? Somebody trying to defame the Jews or a disgruntled Jew? And if there's a disgruntled Jew, do you blame him? I mean, how many anti-Semitic things do we find written? So what, you're not going to find even one Jewish thing that's Gentile? It's a wonder we don't have more. Okay, so let's go back to this Mr. Liar here. He's not always referred to by the same name. Yeah, well, see, what this guy's going to do is he's going to create names and claim that they are really names for Christ in the Talmud. And when you see what the names really are, you're going to laugh your head off. Many passages in the Talmudic books. No, I found one citation of all the things he says here. Okay? The real name of Christ in Hebrew is, he can't even spell it right, Yeshua HaNotzri. Okay, there's no SCH in there. That's German spelling. Okay? And this should be capitalized if you're going to transliterate it. Notzeri, the Nazarene, the dedicated one. Natsar means to dedicate. Famous in number 6. Okay? The word Nazarene is indeed all over the Talmud. It's talking about the Nazarite vow. And it talks a lot about Samson in the Talmud. Okay? And he makes it sound like he's called Notri from the city of Nazareth. Duh, who doesn't know that? This is extraneous. It's padding. This is a lie technique called padding. Okay, he already said Nazarene right here. You don't have to tell me that he's come from Nazareth. Everybody knows that. Thus, in the Talmud, the Christians are also called Nazarenes. No, this is nowhere in the Talmud. Nowhere. The word Christian is not in the Talmud. The word Nazarene is solely used in the context of the Nazarite vow. There's a whole book called Nazir. Okay, I wonder if I can show that to you here. Oh, please. Yeah. Okay. Let's see if I can show it to you. Is it in here? I forget which of the orders it's in. I'm not seeing it real easily, but it's a whole division within one of these 6. I forget where Nazir is located. It might be in Kodeshim. Is Nazir in there? No, I don't see it. Oh, probably in Moed. Okay, well, I'm not finding it quickly. But Nazir is a whole book of the Talmud. all right, dedicated to the dedicated ones, and what constitutes being a Nazir, all right? So this is a big lie right here. Big fat lie. Okay? The word Yeshua means Savior. Golly, who doesn't know that? You can't even spell it right. Okay? The name Jesus rarely occurs in Jewish books. Actually, it does occur in the Talmud. Because it's a common name. It means Joshua. So you could go here. I can't do it for you because you have to be a member to do this. And I don't want to violate the copyright. But you could type the word Jesus in there. And you will find all the occurrences of Jesus in the Talmud that's Babylonian, the Tosefta, and the Mishnah, and the Jerusalem Talmud, which is much shorter than Babylonian. Go look it up yourself. There are like 5 or 6 references. Okay, it has nothing to do with Jesus Christ. You know I hate the Talmud. If I wanted to see something nasty about it, and this were true, I would tell you. Alright? It ain't there. Okay? And then, he's got this little invention. Maliciously taken from the 3 words Imach, Shemo, Vizkro. May his name and memory be blotted out. No. Somebody made that up. It's not in there. Okay? Does that mean that no Jews thought that way? Of course a lot of Jews think that way. The Jews think that Jesus Christ is not God, that he was a heretic. They do think that. And you would too if you were raised Jewish. It's understandable why they have that attitude. Okay? But it's not in the Talmud. It might be in here somewhere. In Toledot Yeshu, written by somebody in the Middle Ages or the 1800s, who were probably Christians, who knew a lot about Judaism in order to make the Jews look bad. But that blue text in there, can't find it. In the Talmud, Jesus Christ is called Oto Ish, that man. No, it isn't. I searched it. Why don't you search it and see if you can find it? That man does not necessarily mean him. It is a Greek expression that is in the Bible. Ekainos is the Greek word. Okay, tis is the Greek word for a certain one. That man is ekainos. Very frequently used by the Jews of Christ in the New Testament. If you know how to search in the Greek, search on ekainos. Of course, it occurs like a bazillion times. But about, I want to say maybe 50 of those, maybe less, are referring to Christ. And it is an epithet for him in the New Testament, not in the Talmud. That's not anywhere. That's referring to him. Okay? The one who is known to all. Yeah, that is the phrase. That is what it means. Okay, but it's not used that way in the Talmud. It is used that way in the New Testament. Okay, then in the tract Abo Zarah, that means idolatry. Abodah means work, really. Work, service to a stranger, meaning not God. He is called this right here, this whole phrase. It's not there. I looked in all the versions. In that, he's saying that this is where this phrase is located. That this sentence is located here. No, it isn't. Of course, what they would claim now is, oh, it was expunged. Expunged, or did some Christian add it to make the Jews look bad? And then call it expunged. Because, of course, it really isn't in the Talmud. Because maybe it was never there in the first place. Got that? Okay? And then it's got Chagiga 4b. Mary, the mother of a certain one of whom it is related. This killed me. Okay? That phrase there in blue, all right, it's not Mary, it's Miriam, because that's what Mary means. It's Miriam the hairdresser. okay, and her life was taken, and then in 5a instead of 4b, in 5a, her years for her life being taken were added to a rabbi's. It was a fake story to illustrate a point. But the text you see in blue is not there. Okay? It's just not there. Alright? So that's big lie. Out of contempt, he's called Nagar bar Nagar, carpenter, the son of a carpenter. No, that's not what it says. In fact, here's what's so hysterical about this lie, is that at the end of Babylonian Sanhedrin 106a, that's a folio number, it says, she who was the descendant of princes and governors played the harlot with carpenters. Now you could, if you wanted to, treat that as an allusion to Mary of the Bible. I mean, it sounds pretty pointed, doesn't it? Okay, but get this. In the Jerusalem Talmud, in Yebamot 8.2, Roman numeral 3, I can't show it to you due to copyright reasons, it uses the phrase son of carpenters. And if you read the context, it equates carpentership to being learned. Okay, again, the citation, because I can't show it on screen, is the Jerusalem Talmud, Yebamot 8.2, number 3. So go over here to Rabbinic Traditions and search on that. Son of carpenters. Carpenters plural, son singular. And you will find Yerushalayim Yebamot, okay, 8.2, Roman numeral 3, uses that phrase. And if you keep on reading through like a paragraph or two, you'll find out that to be a carpenter was considered to be learned. So it's a compliment, not an insult. But he makes it look like it's an insult, as if it's out of contempt. It's a compliment to be a carpenter or son of a carpenter. But this exact phrase is not used. Sons of a carpenter, son of carpenters is used. And it's a term of respect in the Talmud. Okay? There's another location for that same phrase, which is also in the Jerusalem Talmud, Kiddushim 4.6, 1:2, capital C. Has the same idea. It's equated with being learned. It's a compliment to be a son of a carpenter. So it's not talking about Jesus. If they were out to be contemptuous of Jesus, this phrase is not talking about him then. And if it is talking about him, it's nice, not nasty. It means being learned. Okay? So then we come to the next thing. The one who was hanged. Okay? If you search everywhere in the Talmud on hanged, you find it almost exclusively used, okay, in other contexts. Has nothing to do with Christ at all. It has to do with whether it's hanging or stoning. It doesn't talk about anyone in particular. Okay? And is this true? I couldn't find it. Makes sense, though. This doesn't necessarily mean anything nasty about Christ. They were, well, this phrase here, this phrase in there, I couldn't find it anyway. All right? But you can understand, if it were there, why this would be said. Because like half of the Talmud, not half, 20% is more realistic. About 20% of the Talmud has to do with what kind of relationships do you have with the Gentiles near their own festival days? Are you helping them to spread idolatry? And the actual context in the Talmud is about pagan idolaters. The Romans, with their gods and their idols and their feast days and their libations and their drink offerings. None of those were practices of Christians. All right? So it's stating to the idols and idol worshiping that have to do not with Christians, but with Romans. Okay? Roman paganism. So just search on the word hanged here at Rabbinic Traditions and you'll see that yourself. Of course, you got to join them. See? You got to join them in order to search it. Or, search it whatever other way you want. But see the real Talmud and not what this guy's saying. So this is a big lie. He's making all that up. Okay? Now, did Ibn Ezra make some comment like this about Constantine? Yeah, probably. So, the one who was hanged, even the Bible calls Christ the one who was hanged. But it's not in the Talmud. But it is in the Bible. In Peter, I want to say. Hanged on a tree. I think that's the phrase in Peter. See? This guy's just flat out lying now. Now, then we get, this is so precious. This is just like what the church fathers do, okay? And of course, this guy was a big fan of the church fathers. This stuff is actually in Tract Kala 1b. It's not only there, it's in other places. Okay? It's a story about how smart Rabbi Akiva was. That he was able, Rabbi Akiva was the guy who ended up following Bar Kokhba in 130 AD. They like to praise Akiva. Okay, they make up all kinds of stories about him that aren't true. And this is one of those stories. But this has nothing to do with Jesus Christ. If you read the section that he's quoting, you find out that it was a test to see if Akiva knew what he was doing. And the woman is alive at the same time he is. That can't be Mary. Alright? And the son was born to her. But that's not Mary. But he's ascribing this incident, which couldn't possibly refer to Mary, because Akiva lived, alright, he would have been born, 70 AD or so. So Christ had long been dead by the time he was born. And the woman he's allegedly talking to is obviously near him in age, even if she's 30 years distance. Okay, so it can't be Mary. Mary would have been dead by then. This guy backed Bar Kokhba, which was 132, 135 AD. Okay, at most you can say he would have been at oldest, 70? Okay, that means he would have had to have been born after the temple died. Alright? And even if you say he's younger, the woman in this story is not Mary. At all. That the Jews understood this to refer to Jesus and as Mary is clearly demonstrated. And see, and look what he's quoting. Toldat Yesu. Generations of Jesus. That's this book that was written primarily in the 19th century. That somebody invented, and this is one version of the story. Some speculate that it came out like 500 AD at the earliest. There were a lot of stories that came out. So this is totally unconnected to Toldat Yeshu. Because this happened before 500 AD. I mean, it was written up before 500 AD, maybe 300 AD. Okay? This is later. And the two events are unrelated. He's trying to relate a book that that's nowhere, it's not in the Talmud, it's not even in the Apocrypha. Alright? It's this invented book that bears all the marks of a hoax, trying to make the Jews look bad. And there it is. You see it there. That's one version of the story. Just search on the title and you'll find all the versions. I found at least 3. So this guy is linking an unrelated book to an unrelated incident that's in the Talmud. This is really in the Talmud. Okay, it's designed to praise Rabbi Akiva. This has nothing to do with that. That the Jews understood this story to refer to Jesus and his Mary is demonstrated in their book? No, it's not demonstrated. These are 2 unrelated books. Okay? When you say that somebody is illegitimate, I've already gone through in the synoptic videos that the Jews said he was illegitimate. Conceived during menstruation, no. They didn't accuse him of that. They did accuse him of being illegitimate, and they accused him to his face of being illegitimate in John 8. So he doesn't need to add this. This is the sign of a liar. A liar is always insecure. A liar has to add stuff to his argument because he never feels like he's proven it enough, because of course he's telling a lie, so he'll never feel like he's secure and has proven it. And of course this whole book was just an invention by somebody, and by the looks of it, it was invented by a Christian. But you can read about that on the internet and you tell me what you think. Alright, so-called generations of Jesus. Now, this title is going to be really important for something that comes up later. Alright? Then our next slide. This is Sanhedrin 67a, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Now, what he's doing here is he's mixing stuff here. This part of it, right here, is one part of the Talmud. And it's just talking about how do you test the testimony of a witness for validity. That's all it is. Okay? This is how you trap somebody who's a liar. Alright, and this isn't just in 67a, it's in other parts of the Talmud also. Just that part. Okay? This is in a different section of the Talmud. Alright? They hanged him on the eve of Passover. Like I said, you should search the word hanged. You will find this. This is differently spelled. It's stada, stadi. Okay? And this is differently spelled. Lida. Okay? And hanged him on the eve of Passover. Okay. Then it says, this son of stada, and they do variantly spell it in the Talmud, and this word is in the Talmud, was the son of, and this is the killer. I almost died when I saw this. It's spelled in English, Pandira. Okay? Pandira, Pandara, Pandiri. It's got different spellings. Okay, but what does it really mean? This pan is really ben, like son of. And what's called dira here is dor, meaning generation. Son of generation. Now, I don't know, maybe you have to be familiar with Hebrew, but when you use a name like that, it's not really a name. It's a straw man. There are lots of stories in the Talmud. I'm going to say this again. I don't like the Talmud. But at the same time, they shouldn't be falsely accused. They make up stories in order to advance principles or show how principles relate. Right or wrong, the principles. They make up stories. They make up straw men. This is Ben Dor. D-O-R. Dor means generation in Hebrew. Pan is a transliteration from Ben, son of. Dor, son of generation. The idea of having such a name is to prove that it's not any real person. Okay, you got that? Son of generation. Alright, because they're trying to tell a story. This isn't referring to Mary, and it isn't referring to Jesus. It's a story about idolatry. It's a story about, playing games with God. It's not a well-told story. It's kind of a petty story. All right? But this is not a real person. It's certainly not Jesus Christ. Okay, because Lud is nowhere near. Okay, nowhere near Jerusalem. Okay? Then it says, Rabbi Chasada tells us that Pandera was the husband of Stada. Well, actually, no. You have to look here for a lot of that garbage. It's not the Talmud. It's not in the Talmud. Okay? The word Stada is there. The word Pandera in variant spelling is there. But there's straw men. Okay? This part he's getting from here, in one of the versions of the story. Okay? I don't know if it's this version of the story, but it's one of them, because I've been looking at a lot of different sites, so I'm not sure which of those. But it's coming basically from some version of this. That's not in the Talmud. Okay? That's somebody's invention. It's not even part of the Apocrypha. The meaning of this is that Mary was called Stada, that is, prostitute. Really? It's like, this is invented out of thin air. Okay? You do find Stada in there. Okay, but there's nothing to associate it with Mary. There's really nothing to associate it with prostitute exactly either. Okay? And this is recorded in the Jerusalem Talmud and by Maimonides. No, it's not. Stada is there. Pandera is there. You can search on those terms. You have to change the spelling. You can search on those terms right in here, and they'll give you all the references. There's like about 10 or 15 of them tops. Okay? And none of them give you any inkling that this is talking about Jesus and Mary. Okay? And then we get this. That the mention here is of Mary, the mother of Jesus, is verified. Verified. This killed me when I saw this. In Chagigah 4b. Okay. Now remember, in Chagigah 4b, we just finished sawing that. He's repeating a citation that he gave. This doesn't exist in Chagigah 4b. It's not there. It's not in Shabbat 104b either. But because he already pretended as if it was already there, by the time he gets down here, see, he's threading his lie. He's saying that it's in the same place. Okay? Now, Mary isn't mentioned there. There's a Mary the hairdresser. Okay? But Mary the hairdresser is not Mary Magdalene or Mary the mother of Christ. Okay? Death angel? And a rabbi orders a death angel? And this phrase here, in place of the other Mary, that's not in there. In other words, this part is here. This part is in the Talmud. Okay? And it is in 4b. Okay? That much of it. Just that much of it. Okay, well, this part too. Okay? This text is not in there. At all. Okay? There is no marginal note. That whole text there in blue, that's not there. That's not in the Talmud. So whose marginal note is it? This is not there either. So this whole section here is not there. See what he's doing? He's inventing and embellishing, because this word is Mary. It's actually Miriam. Okay? So then he adds this other stuff to make it look like his first fake quote. Back up here. He wants to make this quote look valid. See, it's the same citation, except that the text isn't there. Alright? So this text is not there, this whole thing. Not there. Alright, so he's alternating between lie and truth. Lie and truth. And he thinks he won't get caught? Unbelievable. Okay, now, when you go to actually read this section of the text, you find out that in 5a, that the rabbi in question was upset that the woman, Mary the hairdresser, was killed. He was upset about it. Alright? And the so-called death angel was really a demon of some kind. Okay? Says, well, I'm going to take the years that I took from her and add them to a rabbi. But the rabbi was upset that this woman was killed. You'll notice how our boy leaves that fact out. And that's in Chagiga 5b. Just keep reading for another couple of paragraphs. Alright? And bear in mind, this is a folio number. Okay? Marginal note? Show me the marginal note, honey. I'm not taking your word for it anymore. I've caught you lying too much. Show me the marginal note. And in Shabbat, the passage referred to, see, the passage that doesn't exist, referred to says, did not the son of Stata practice Egyptian magic? Yes, this is in Talmud. Okay? But it's not just there, and it's not there in that context. Okay? This, what I'm trying to tell you is that this is not related to this. They're not related, they're not related examples. Okay? The quote is there, but it's not related to this. These are two separate events. Okay? And he's just linking them, he's saying that he's putting this in there. Okay, but it's not, they're not together. In other words, the rabbis are giving examples or different situations to illustrate points. These two people are not related. There's no relationship between the persons here. Okay? And yes, the magic of the sun is explained. Not necessarily here. Okay, I couldn't find this at all. But it wouldn't surprise me if it was there. Okay, and then he quotes some guy. He's quoting somebody outside the Talmud. Now get this. He's quoting somebody outside the Talmud who's claiming that Ben Stata was Jesus. Okay, but the Talmud doesn't have the text. The Talmud isn't claiming he's Jesus. There is nothing to support that idea. Some guy Buxdorf is making it up. Okay, see, then if this is made up and alleged to be Talmud, which it is not, then why not have another guy who's not at all part of the Talmud, who he's quoting somebody who believes the same lie he does. See? And that just keeps on going. Alright? Secret books. Where? This isn't anywhere. Not anywhere. Okay? Nowhere. Period. This is this guy making it up. Or this guy believing somebody else's lie. This is not anything related to Talmud at all. Okay? That is talking about the Egyptian guy. Okay? This you can't find because Toldot Yesu is one that's talking about that. That's this book right here. See what you see in blue, and then that in blue is what it's talking about. But that's not part of Talmud. See, this is how lies work. This is how liars work. And there's nothing secret about it. Okay? this text doesn't have anything to do with. That text is definitely in Shabbat, and that is talking about this context only. Okay? It's not just talking about him. It's talking about anybody who is a fool. Okay? Conjurer and a magician. In the infamous Toldoth Yeshu. Yeah, it might be infamous, all right. It might be an infamous invention of a Christian in the 1800s. It's not part of Talmud. That's what he's referring to right there on screen, the Toldoth Yeshu. Okay, infamous book Toldoth Yeshu. But he's acting as if it's part of Talmud. It's not. See, this is another thing that liars do. They take stuff that, it's like somebody taking the Gospel of Thomas and treating that as scripture. And he's, interlacing the book of Thomas with Genesis, as if both were equally valid. That's the kind of liar's game going on here. This was an invention by somebody in the 1800s, and probably not long before, maybe before, in different iterations. Okay, so he links, see, this is a real Talmudic book. That's a real Talmudic quote. This is not Talmud, and I didn't check to see if he even quoted it right. Okay? But whatever it is, it's not part of Talmud. It's part of this invention, which you can search on and find out whichever version you want to buy. But none of them are part of Talmud, not even part of the Apocrypha of Talmud. Okay? And then he goes back to something that really is in the Talmud. Okay? This took me a long time to find. See, this is really in the Talmud. This is another clever liar's technique. That's really in the Talmud. Okay? It's the actual phrase is any plague. It's not no plague. Just search on the word plague. There's going to be 1,000 verses with plague, but you want to search. If you're going to search on it here, search on the words any plague instead of no plague. I lost an hour trying to find it. And it is in Sanhedrin 103a at the bottom. Okay, it is a quote of Psalm 91, which the devil used as the second temptation of Christ. Okay, this is actually really there. All right, but all this is nowhere. It's invented. Jesus the Nazarene is not in the Talmud. You can find the word Jesus there. You can find the word Nazarene, but you don't find Jesus the Nazarene. And you don't even find this phrase. You don't find that phrase. I mean, that would be a valid Talmudic statement, actually, given how the Talmudic thought works. But it ain't there. So where is it? Alright, then we come to our next slide. Supposedly in Sanhedrin 107b. This is the alleged quote. It's not there. Go look here. Search for it. Okay? That phrase in blue doesn't exist. Okay? And then he says, number 7, he's punished by being hanged on a cross. As we have seen above. No, we haven't seen it above because it wasn't in the text about him. We find this in the Bible, though. And in Peter. And elsewhere, obviously in the Gospels. Okay? And now, then here's the next thing. Zohar 282 says that he died like a beast. Do you know how often that blue text is quoted on the internet? Go try to find it, though. You can't. First of all, getting a copy of the Zohar to even search is a mind-numbing thing. There were only 2 that you can search, if unless you're going to search in the Aramaic. And they're not numbered. This citation here, supposed section, volume 3, 282, whether that's page or line number, honey, it doesn't exist. There were only 2 copies of the Zohar I could search online. One of them was in Spanish. Okay? And I searched on these words in Spanish, and I found a dozen references to los hijos de Esau. Okay? But none of them have this text. None of them. None of them. Jesus isn't even in, and you know, in Spanish, if Jesus was in the Zohar, they would say so. It's nowhere in the Zohar. Okay? No dead dogs. Lots of phrases about dogs, but no perros muertos. So if you can find this quote, let me know, because there are at least 100 sites that are quoting this, but nobody has the actual source text. See, this is the embarrassing thing why I'm making this video. Is all kinds of people running around quoting everybody else, and nobody's bothering to check whether the source, if there's a source text to support the claim. This really boils my blood. I've seen the same thing happen with quotes about Augustine's anti-Semitism. Was he anti-Semitic? Yes. But the quotes alleging his anti-Semitism are not. There's no source text to support him. The only anti-Semitism that I was able to find was in his direct letters between him and Jerome, which you can find at newadvent.org. The letters are 402 and following. The letter numbers, according to newadvent.org's own system, in the year 402 through, about 430. Okay? And he's anti-Semitic, all right, but he's not anti-Semitic on a personal level. He's anti-Semitic on a competitor level. Because he doesn't want to have to get into arguments with the Jews, and he's all ticked off at Jerome for using the Hebrew to render a new translation. Because that's going to render, in his mind, that's going to make him have to compete with the Jews all over again. It's that kind of anti-Semitism that Augustine has. But there are quotes attributed to him that are kind of scurrilous like this. Can't find any source material to corroborate that quote. And people repeat and repeat. There are hundreds of sites that repeat alleged Augustinian quotes that are badly worded like this. And there are hundreds of sites that contain this quote. Okay, but there's no book of Zohar anywhere that contains this quote. So where is it? Prove to me that there is such a book, and then I'll believe you didn't make it up. Okay? Then he lists as the ninth nasty thing, worshipped as God after his death by his followers. So, that's not a nasty thing. It's a fact. That's what we did. We didn't really believe he was Messiah until he died. Okay? And then he's quoting this, supposedly of Maimonides. Okay, somebody please find this quote. Because first of all, I couldn't even find this from Maimonides. So I couldn't find any quote like this in any source. Okay? And even if it were true that it existed, there's nothing offensive here. There's no offensiveness here. If that's exactly what Maimonides really said, that's a pretty cogent definition of what our claim is, isn't it? There's nothing offensive about that. Okay? He's arguing against Christianity. Well, he should. He's Jewish. Okay? And then he has this other alleged quote here in Hilkot Melachim. I couldn't find this book anywhere on the internet either. Okay? And you know what? If this is really a quote of what Maimonides said, that's a pretty decent quote. It's not nasty. There's nothing nasty there. He's stating the case. He's arguing against Christianity. That's what he ought to do. If he honestly believes Jesus is not the Christ, Jesus is either the Christ or he's the worst criminal who ever lived. And Maimonides believes he's in the second category, but you know what? His argument's pretty nice here. He's summing up the case. And why he thinks Christ isn't Messiah. Okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But this guy is casting it. See, there's another anatomy of a lie. First of all, that's a factual statement. That is exactly what we did. There's nothing wrong for the Jews to say that. Nor is there anything offensive being said here. But this guy's listing it as the ninth bad thing that that Jews are saying against Christians. No, gee, I wish we spoke as well of the Jews as they speak as well as of us here, don't you? Okay, if I thought that Christ was the antithesis, was a total heretic, I sure wouldn't be so nice here. You don't see me be this nice in the comments. This is nice. It's a very good statement. And then an idol. Okay, now we have, and remember this means idolatry in English. Okay, 21a Tosef. Okay. This is hysterical. I almost fell over. This is where I'm going to stop the video. It had to have been at least an hour going through the Hebrew, going through the translation over here at Rabbinic Traditions. Okay, I wish I could show the text on screen, but this is definitely a copyright thing because the Tosefs are subject to copyright rules. You're not even allowed to look at too many texts in one day. There ain't no such thing. This citation he's giving, you know what this is about? Eggs. It's about idol worship and eggs. It is not about selling and renting their houses to Gentiles. Okay, there are places in the Talmud that talk about whether you sell or rent to Gentiles. Okay? This kind of text, this topic, this meaning is in the Talmud, but it's not where he says it is. Okay? And even if it was, what's so wrong about it? Put yourself in the Jew's place. God has told you to separate yourselves. Alright? They're trying, the rabbis, my complaint against the rabbis is not in this area. They're trying to figure out how do they conduct themselves with regard to Gentiles in light of the fact that God says you're supposed to separate yourself out from the Gentiles. Okay? And there's a lot of discussion, pro and con, about how you sell or rent to the Gentiles and whether or not you're encouraging idolatry by doing business with them. When you consider what the Jews believe in, this is a valid issue and an important thing to figure out. Alright? Same thing here. There's nothing bad here. Alright? There's nothing bad there. However, when it says today they have a practice of incensing their idol, that's talking about Roman idols. Roman idols had incense as part of the practice. In other words, they had personal idols that they carried with them, as you saw probably in the movie Gladiator. Okay? They had little dolls that represented their ancestors or their gods. And they were personal, so they carried them with them to remind them. It wasn't even really an idol exactly. It was an image of something they couldn't see. And as you see, the lead guy that Russell Crowe plays throughout Gladiator, he's cuddling those idols, and at the very end, the black guy he makes friends with buries those little baby idols. Okay, Silgaria. I think that's what they're called. My brain isn't working too well. But that's what this is talking about. They were Roman idols. Okay, Roman idols, not the idols of the Gentiles at that time. See, Asher lived a lot later. Okay, so he says today it's permitted to rent houses to Gentiles. Okay, if you were talking about the cross, that somebody comes in, that's when a priest comes in with a cross. Okay, so what's so harmful about that? Okay, but see what this guy is doing, the lie that he's telling, is when rabbis speak of idols of the Gentiles among whom they lived at that time. No, it was Asher's time maybe, at most, if he's talking about Christians. But most of the discussion that's related to this text up here, the discussion related to this text is related to Roman idols and prior. Roman and Chemosh and all that other good nonsense. It's not related to Christianity. Christianity didn't develop into any kind of icon. They didn't have icons until Constantine. Okay, they started to have them, I guess you could say, in the late 2nd century, just before Diocletian came to power. That was when it started. But 1st and 2nd century, for the most part, Christianity didn't have this stuff. Because it wasn't part of Judaism, so it wasn't part of Christianity either. Judaism didn't do the idol thing. Judaism didn't need it. They did everything by the words. Okay? So any idols during that time were Roman. Okay? So it says when no idols were worshipped clearly meant the Christian idol. Not necessarily. But if it did, this is not related to this. There are about, 500 to 1,000 years separating that text, which isn't even about what he's saying it's about, from this text. This is about eggs and idols. It is not about renting houses. Okay? This is about renting houses, but it's located elsewhere in the Talmud. And it's covering a period from 500 AD prior. This guy is writing in the Middle Ages, and if he's writing what is claimed of him, and if it's allegedly about Christianity, there's nothing nasty in what he's saying. You see? But the way this guy is linking this thing, which is 500 years apart at least, to this text, which is not in the place that he claims it's located, and this, which is about eggs and idols, the guy is linking the text all that way to make it look as if the Talmud is saying something it's not saying.